on Goblin Reddit. Today's story is...
My narcissistic brother harassed and assaulted my girlfriend with my parents' support. 4 years later, he ended up in handcuffs when his new wife revealed years of systematic abuse. From the moment I introduced Victoria, my girlfriend of 25 years, to my family, my brother Samuel began to behave inappropriately, making her feel extremely uncomfortable. He literally pushed our mother aside to be the first to hug Victoria, holding the embrace for so long that she had to physically pull away. Throughout the dinner, he constantly found excuses to touch her arm or shoulder, telling nonsensical jokes considering they barely knew each other. And he even managed to sit next to her several times, coming between us. He completely crossed the line when he tried to feed her food with his own fork while staring her in the eyes. Victoria was visibly uncomfortable, but she remained polite as it was her first family gathering, and she didn't feel confident enough to confront him. Throughout the evening, Samuel kept telling embarrassing stories about my childhood, distorting them to make me look like a complete fool. He even made up a completely false story about how he supposedly had to rescue my high school girlfriend from my alleged emotional abuse, something that never happened. Victoria knew these stories were false because I had already told her about my adolescence, but my parents just stood there, nodding, as if Samuel were telling the absolute truth. After dinner, the situation worsened considerably. Victoria, always polite, offered to help with the cleaning. I was helping my father move some boxes in the garage when I realized that it had been a while since I had seen Victoria. I found her in the kitchen with Samuel literally blocking her way to the door. He had her pinned against the sink, telling her that she deserved someone more exciting than her boring and unstable older brother. He was standing too close to her, with one hand resting on the countertop next to her head. Victoria had already asked him twice to move away when I walked in. When she saw me, her expression showed immediate relief, and she quickly came to my side. Samuel just laughed, pretending it was all a joke, but I could feel Victoria trembling next to me. I think I should provide some context about our family dynamic for this to make sense. Samuel and I grew up in an upper-middle-class family in a small town in Minnesota. Our parents work in real estate and earn good money, but they have always been more concerned with keeping up appearances than cultivating genuine family relationships. Samuel was born when I was 3 years old, and from the moment of his arrival, he became the absolute center of our parents' universe. As we grew older, Samuel began to display some truly worrying behavior that my parents completely ignored. When he was 6, he deliberately broke my video game console simply because I wouldn't let him play when he wanted to. Instead of punishing him, my parents bought him his own and scolded me for not sharing. When he was 12, he killed my hamster by feeding it chocolate, knowing full well that it was toxic, but my parents insisted it was an accident and that I shouldn't have had a pet if I wasn't going to look after it properly. In secondary school, he spread false rumors that I had cheated on my then-girlfriend, which caused us to break up. My parents said he was just being, quote, protective of her. This pattern has continued into our adult life. Samuel still lives with our parents, works in my father's real estate agency, and basically does as he pleases. He has sabotaged every relationship I have tried to have. With my last girlfriend before Victoria, he convinced her family that I had a gambling addiction, which was completely untrue. Before that, he told another girlfriend that I had cheated on all my previous partners, also a lie. When I met Victoria, I decided to do things differently. I kept our relationship completely secret from my family for the first 3 months, because I wanted to protect her from Samuel's usual tactics. Victoria is honestly the best thing that has happened to me in my life. She works as a pediatric nurse at the local hospital. We met in the hospital cafeteria where I was having coffee while visiting a coworker who had undergone surgery. She was on her lunch break, and we started talking about the terrible hospital coffee. After several more conversations about coffee, we started dating, and everything just felt right. Victoria knows my whole family history because she wanted me to be prepared. In fact, it was she who encouraged me to introduce her to my family, suggesting that maybe things would be different now that we are adults. She always tries to see the best in people, which is one of the things I admire most about her. I finally agreed to introduce Victoria to my family at a dinner last month, and that's when everything started to fall apart. The real problem began a few days after the dinner. Victoria started receiving strange calls and messages from unknown numbers. At first, she would just hear heavy breathing, or the call would drop when she answered. Then they started leaving increasingly disturbing voice messages. Some messages mentioned specific details about her work schedule and what she was wearing that day, which showed that someone was watching her. Initially, Victoria didn't make the connection, but I recognized some of the voices as Samuel's old friends from high school. This group of guys still hangs out with him and basically does whatever he tells them to. In short, a bunch of losers. When Victoria blocked those numbers, they started calling from new ones. Then Samuel's friends started showing up at the hospital, pretending to be visitors, but really hanging around the pediatric unit where Victoria works. They would stare at her for hours, making comments loud enough for her to hear. Last week, one of them followed her to her car after her night shift. She was so terrified that she called me crying from her vehicle. I had to go pick her up and drive her car home, while my friend followed us in his car to make sure they weren't chasing us. Victoria has started having panic attacks before her shifts, and her coworkers have noticed that something is not right. Yesterday, I finally had enough evidence to confront Samuel directly. I had recordings of the voice messages, screenshots of the text messages, and recordings from the hospital's security cameras, showing his friends harassing Victoria. I went to my parents' house, where Samuel still lives, and showed him everything. He just stood there smiling, then looked me straight in the eye and said he had no idea what I was talking about. But he added that maybe if Victoria wasn't so stuck up, people wouldn't feel the need to teach her a lesson. That was enough to make me lose control and punch him in the face. Samuel immediately started crying as if I had tried to kill him, even though he had only got a nosebleed. Our parents came running in, and of course they were furious with me, not Samuel. They didn't even look at the evidence I was trying to show them. My mother was hysterical about her injured baby, while my father shouted that I had always been jealous of Samuel and that I needed professional help for my anger issues. When I tried to explain about the bullying, my mother actually said that Victoria must have flirted with Samuel during dinner, and that she was now acting like a victim because she was caught flirting with him. My father ordered me to leave his house and not come back until I apologized to Samuel and put my head in place. I'm writing this from Victoria's apartment, where I've been since last night. She finally fell asleep in the other room after crying for hours because she's afraid of going to work tomorrow. Her supervisor has been understanding so far, but Victoria is worried about losing her job if this escalates any further. She loves working with the children in pediatrics, and she shouldn't have to give that up because of my deranged brother. I just don't know what to do anymore. Every time I think Samuel can't sink any lower, he proves me wrong. Our parents are completely supportive of his behavior. The police won't do anything without concrete evidence linking Samuel directly to the harassment. Victoria is living in fear. Her job could be in danger, and my family acts like we're the ones causing problems. Addition, I know that reporting his friends, which we will do, may help the police do something about my brother. But that group of idiots is probably too afraid of him to mess with him and accuse him. Update 1. I would like to thank you all for your comments and advice. Victoria and I have been trying to follow the advice of many of you about documenting everything and taking legal action. However, things have worsened considerably over the last 2 weeks. We took the advice to go to the police. Victoria and I spent hours gathering evidence. Screenshots of all the threatening messages, recordings of the voicemails, and footage from the hospital's security cameras, which showed Samuel's friends lurking around. We also had written statements from 3 of Victoria's coworkers who witnessed the harassing behavior. The officer we spoke to seemed concerned initially, especially about the workplace harassment, but then things got complicated. It turns out that Samuel's best friend, Tyler, one of the main culprits of the harassment towards Victoria, is the son of a local police sergeant. When we mentioned Tyler's surname, the officer's attitude changed completely. He suggested that perhaps Victoria was misinterpreting the friendly attention from the boys, who were only in the hospital for legitimate reasons. He even had the audacity to ask if Victoria had perhaps encouraged their attention in some way. We asked to speak to another officer, preferably a woman, but we were given excuses. Finally, they said they would issue warnings to the people we could identify on the security footage, but that was the most they could do without concrete evidence of real threats. It was a complete waste of time. My parents' reaction was even worse than I expected. The day after I went to the police, Samuel showed up at my parents' house with a black eye, claiming that I had attacked him again. I hadn't even seen him since the night I hit his nose. And of course, my parents believed him immediately. My mother called me in hysterical tears, saying that I was out of control and that my violence had to stop, especially against Samuel. She said that going to the police showed that I was trying to ruin his future over a silly misunderstanding. Then my father called me, furious. He informed me that I could no longer count on them in the future, whether I needed money or a job in the family business. Fortunately, I have a good job and my own apartment. It really showed how they don't even see me as an independent person, just as an extension of Samuel's life. The real disaster happened last weekend. My mother promised that Samuel would apologize for everything, both to me and to Victoria. She said they had talked to him about boundaries and that he understood that it had been inappropriate. That would have been something new, if it had been true. After discussing it with Victoria, we decided to give them a chance to fix things, mainly at Victoria's insistence. That was a big mistake. We arrived at my parents' house for what was supposed to be a family dinner to sort things out. As soon as we walked in, I knew something was wrong. The house was full of people. My parents, Samuel, our uncles who have always sided with Samuel, and worst of all, Tyler and two other guys who had been bullying Victoria at work. My mother called it a family intervention. For 2 hours, everyone took turns attacking Victoria's character while Samuel sat back, clearly enjoying the show. My mother began with a long monologue about how Victoria was obviously attracted to Samuel's attractiveness and success, and had been flirting with him that first night. He claimed that Victoria was making the harassment up because she felt guilty about giving Samuel the wrong signals, and that she was now trying to cover up her actions. My uncle suggested that Victoria was probably used to receiving male attention at work, and that she had misinterpreted the friendly behavior as harassment due to her guilty conscience. Samuel played his part perfectly, acting sad and confused as to why Victoria would make up horrible lies about him. He kept saying things like how much he had hoped to have a sister-in-law, and how sad he was that she was trying to turn me against her. Tyler and his friends backed him up, swearing that they only went to the hospital because they were visiting Tyler's sick grandmother, who apparently moves between different floors every day. The worst part was when they started questioning Victoria's mental stability. They mentioned that she sometimes works night shifts, suggesting that perhaps sleep deprivation was making her paranoid. They talked about how stressful it must be to work with sick children, implying that maybe she was projecting her work stress. My mother even had the audacity to recommend a therapist who could help her. Victoria tried to defend herself at first, calmly explaining the bullying and showing them the text messages and voicemails again, but they talked about her as if she weren't there, dismissed her evidence as misunderstandings, or suggested that she had somehow provoked it all. When Tyler started describing in detail what Victoria had been wearing on specific days at work, clearly demonstrating that he had been stalking her, my parents acted as if that was evidence that Victoria was trying to, quote, attract attention. Everything became unbearable when they invited Tyler and his friends to join us for dessert, saying they wanted to show us what good boys they really were. Victoria started to have difficulty breathing and had to leave the room. When I tried to go after her, my mother grabbed my arm and told me it was time for me to choose between my real family and a girl who was obviously unstable and trying to cause trouble. I chose Victoria. We left immediately, and I haven't spoken to my family since that night. Samuel's friends have become bolder in their harassment, now spreading rumors in Victoria's workplace that she is mentally disturbed and has a history of making false accusations. Her supervisor called her in for a meeting yesterday to discuss concerns about the drama at work. Although he seemed sympathetic, he warned her that all this disruption was starting to affect her work performance and suggested that she consider transferring to another department in the hospital. We have hired a lawyer who is helping us apply for restraining orders, but it's a slow process. Victoria has been looking for positions at other hospitals, and one of her former colleagues has offered to help her get a job at a hospital in a city about 300 kilometers away. I hate that we are being forced to consider such drastic measures, but I can't bear to see Victoria so scared and constantly stressed. She cries before every shift now, and she has lost weight because she is too anxious to eat. I just don't know what to do anymore. Every attempt to handle this reasonably has failed. My family is completely distraught, the police are useless, and I feel like Samuel is winning. Update 2. I wish I had better news to share, but everything has completely spiraled out of control after what happened at my cousin Jolly's wedding last weekend. I took a few days before sitting down to write this update. The only positive thing about this nightmare is that it ended with Samuel in handcuffs and our family permanently divided. First, some context. Jolly has always been the only member of the family, apart from my grandfather, who doesn't believe Samuel's lies. When we were children, she caught Samuel torturing her cat and told everyone, but my parents convinced the family that she was lying for attention. Jolly never forgot and has been firmly on my side throughout this whole situation with Victoria. She even wrote a detailed statement for our lawyer about Samuel's behavioral history. When Jolly sent us the invitation to her wedding, Victoria and I were hesitant to attend, but Jolly called us personally, promising that she had only invited Samuel because his parents insisted, and that she had hired additional security specifically to keep an eye on him. She also seated us at a table with her husband's family, away from my parents and Samuel. We thought that, with all the witnesses around, and the security present, Samuel would not try to do anything reckless. The ceremony went off without a hitch. At the reception, everything seemed fine initially. Samuel was sitting at the family table with our parents, and we were on the other side of the room with Jolly's in-laws. Victoria was finally starting to relax and enjoy herself for the first time in weeks. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Victoria went to the bathroom. She had been gone about 10 minutes when I noticed that Samuel was no longer at his table. Something didn't feel right, so I went to look for Victoria. As I walked towards the bathroom, I heard Victoria scream. I started running, and that's when Jolly's husband Miller and his brother came around the corner in front of me. They found Samuel holding Victoria against the wall in the corridor outside the toilets, trying to assault her as she struggled. Samuel had one hand over her mouth, and the other was holding her arms so tightly that it left bruises. Miller and his brother pulled her away from Samuel just as I arrived. Victoria was shaking and crying, her dress was torn at the shoulder, and there were visible marks on her arms. Samuel was obviously drunk and started shouting that Victoria had been teasing him all night, when she literally hadn't gone anywhere near him. Miller's brother, who is a policeman in another town, immediately called the local police while Miller took Victoria to a private room where Jolly and her mother tried to calm her down. This is where it all got worse, if that's possible. When the police arrived, my parents tried to stop them from arresting Samuel. My mother was shouting about how it was all a misunderstanding, that Victoria must have provoked Samuel. My father even tried to physically stop the officers from handcuffing Samuel, saying that they should handle this as a family matter. But the police warned him that they could handcuff him too. Samuel went from crying about how Victoria had seduced him to threatening everyone, saying that none of us understood what he was capable of. He looked completely unhinged. As he was being bundled into the police car, he started shouting obscenities about Victoria, saying that she had been provoking him from the moment they first met. Several guests recorded the whole episode with their phones. The consequences have been devastating. My parents are out of control, calling everyone in the family to spread their version of events. According to them, Victoria took Samuel to a secluded place, made advances to him, and then cried assault when he rejected her. They are saying that she orchestrated the whole thing to get back at Samuel for exposing her lies about the bullying. They are even claiming that Miller and his brother beat Samuel up before the police arrived, which is absolutely untrue, and that Victoria gave herself the bruises. The only silver lining is that the video from Jolly's wedding captured Samuel following Victoria into the bathroom. Between that, the bruises, several eyewitnesses, and the videos of Samuel collapsing during the arrest, our lawyer has a lot of material to work with. Several family members who were at the wedding have come forward with statements about Samuel's behavior throughout the evening, including vulgar comments towards Victoria and how he followed her around the reception. My parents are now threatening to disinherit me if Victoria doesn't drop the charges. They even showed up at my apartment yesterday, causing such a scene that my neighbors called the police. My mother cried about how I was sending her baby to jail, while my father threatened to make sure I never work in this state. Victoria and I have now made our decision. She accepted the job offer at the hospital 300 kilometers away, and I have secured an agreement to work remotely for my company. We are moving at the end of next month. Many people might think we are running away, but we simply need to get away from all this toxicity and start over somewhere else. Jolly understands and has promised to keep us informed of any family news we need to know. The hardest part of all this is knowing that my family will never admit that Samuel needs help, even after seeing him assault someone at a wedding in front of numerous witnesses. They continue to defend him and blame the victim. I have pondered whether anything would have been different if someone had intervened when we were children, but I guess we'll never know. Update 3. I wasn't planning to publish another update, but something happened yesterday that I feel I should share. After 4 blessed years of silence from my family, I received a hysterical phone call from my mother. First, a brief update on how things are going with Victoria and me. We got married 2 years ago in a small ceremony with Jolly's family and Victoria's relatives. We bought a house in our new city, and Victoria is now head of pediatric nursing at her hospital. I continue to work remotely for the same company, but I was promoted last year. We are expecting our first child, a girl, in 3 months. Life has been peaceful and happy, which makes what I am about to share even more disturbing. Yesterday afternoon, I was in a meeting when my phone started ringing with calls from my mother. I usually ignore unknown numbers, as my family tends to change their phone to try to contact us, but this time she left a voice message. It turns out that Samuel married a woman named Rachel last year. None of us knew because we haven't had any contact with that part of the family since the wedding incident. Apparently, Samuel met Rachel at church and their families arranged the marriage pretty quickly. My mom talked about how perfect everything seemed, how Samuel had finally found a good Christian woman who understood him, and how everyone was so happy until last week. Last Thursday, Rachel's coworker called the police after Rachel missed 3 days of work. When the officers carried out a welfare check, they found Rachel seriously injured. She had 2 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, and bruises all over her body. But here's the part that really shocked me. When the police investigated, they discovered that my father had been helping Samuel cover up the abuse for months. Rachel finally broke down and told the police everything. Samuel had started hitting her just 2 months after they were married. Every time she threatened to leave or tell someone, my father intervened, using his connections in the real estate business to put pressure on Rachel's family about her mortgage, or threatening to make her lose her job at one of his friends' companies. He even convinced Rachel's parents that she was mentally unstable and making up stories about Samuel, using the same tactics they used against Victoria. The final incident occurred because Rachel got a promotion at work that would have given her financial independence. Samuel completely lost control and hit her so hard that she couldn't go to work. When she called my father for help, he told her to put on ice and remember your wedding vows. It was then that Rachel's coworker got involved and called the police. Both Samuel and my father were arrested, Samuel for domestic violence and my father for witness intimidation and conspiracy. My mother wanted me to go back and help sort everything out. According to her, Samuel, my father, needed my support, and Rachel was obviously exaggerating things just like Victoria did. I lost my temper. I told her exactly what I thought, that this whole problem was a direct consequence of her actions. My mother completely broke down, saying that now she realized that they should have intervened earlier. She admitted that she and my father always knew that Samuel had problems, but they thought they were protecting him by covering everything up. Too late for those revelations. I hung up and blocked his new number. Jolly called me later to provide more details. The police are also investigating other possible victims, as several of Samuel's ex-girlfriends have come forward with similar stories of abuse and harassment. Victoria suggested that we contact Rachel through Jolly to offer her support if she needs it, which we probably will. Victoria pointed out that she was lucky to have support when dealing with Samuel, and Rachel might need someone who understands what she is going through. Some people might think I'm being too hard on my mother, but I've learned that enabling toxic behavior only leads to more victims. My family had countless opportunities to change, and they chose not to. Now they can face the consequences of their decisions without my help. My priority now is to protect my own family, my wife and our unborn daughter. Update 4. Many of you have been sending me messages asking for an update on the situation with Samuel, my father, and Rachel, so here is what has happened in the last 6 months. First, the good news from me. Victoria and I welcomed our daughter Emma 3 months ago. She is perfectly healthy and absolutely beautiful, although I know any parent would say the same about their child. Jolly and her husband came to visit last month to meet Emma. Now, updates on the case of Samuel and my father. Jolly has kept us informed as she is still in touch with the extended family. Samuel accepted a plea deal last month. He is receiving 8 years in prison for aggravated domestic violence, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. My father's case is still ongoing, but his lawyers are apparently trying to negotiate a deal as well. His real estate license has been suspended while the investigation continues, and most of his business associates have cut ties with him. The most surprising development has been my mother. After our last phone conversation, she finally started therapy. According to Jolly, she moved out of the family home and filed for divorce from my father. Last week, she sent me a 12-page letter apologizing for everything, for having allowed Samuel's behavior throughout her life, for not protecting me when we were children, and especially for how they treated Victoria. I think her therapist has had a considerable influence on this. She acknowledged that she and my father essentially created the monster that Samuel became by never holding him accountable for his actions. An apology too late for my taste. For this reason, she will never meet Emma, and we will keep our distance from my family. We don't want a grandmother who could forgive her golden son when he gets out of prison. Rachel has been in contact with us through Jolly. She is improving, living with her sister in another state, and receiving therapy. She has filed for divorce and is cooperating fully with prosecutors. According to Jolly, several other women have come forward with allegations of abuse by Samuel in the past, including 2 from her church. The police are also investigating these cases. Rachel's parents have been incredibly supportive since the truth came out. They are even now working with domestic violence organizations to help other families recognize the signs of abuse and manipulation. The extended family has basically split into 2 camps. Most of the younger relatives and cousins have sided with us and Rachel, while the older generation keeps looking for excuses for Samuel and my father. Jolly's mother, my aunt, has formed a family therapy group for relatives who want to understand how things got to this point and how to improve the situation for the next generation. As for Victoria and I, we are focused on our daughter. Victoria returned to work part-time last week and has been promoted to Director of Pediatric Nursing. I am still working remotely, but I might start my own business soon. We have built a wonderful community here with great friends and a family we have chosen ourselves. Update 5. I owed you at least one more update, as many were concerned about what might happen with my father and his own trial. Also to answer other questions, such as what happened to my brother's bullying friends. My brother's loser friends have continued to be losers. Tyler, the worst of them all, has been on drugs for years and lives in an abandoned house with others in a similar situation. His father took early retirement after the whole thing came to light because he was one of those covering up this and other problems in the group. I know he's tried to get his son help, but he usually escapes from rehab and goes back to those houses to keep using. The rest of the group are in a similar state. They either live in trailers or are functional alcoholics who spend most of their time in bars. They never had any real prospect of achieving anything in life. Rachel is completely divorced from that monster she called a brother, keeping some assets that belonged to Samuel. That includes part of my father's real estate business, which he had transferred to her some time ago. She sold it to the competition and still lives with her sister, according to what Victoria told me about the last time she was in touch with her. My mother has also finalized her divorce and sold her share of the family business to move to Florida. There were few people left in my hometown who supported her, no matter how hard she tried to apologize or justify herself. She is now known as the monster's mother, so she has started a new life elsewhere. Last Christmas, she sent a card, like we used to do years ago when we were still what you might call a family. We used to take a photo of us together and send it to the rest of the family. But this year, she was the only one in the photo, and it was a pretty sad picture. No smile, nothing. I burned it on my grill the next time I had a barbecue. She can't think she'll get off so easily with an apology when she lived with and supported my brother and my father for so long. My father reached a legal agreement. He will serve 4 years in prison without the possibility of parole. However, he has had to sell the rest of his business to pay the lawyers, and it will be extremely difficult for him to get a real estate license again when he gets out. Considering the circumstances, he got a pretty favorable deal, which explains the high cost of his lawyers. Meanwhile, my brother continues to serve his sentence, but now with problems much more serious than a simple broken nose like the one I gave him. Jolly has informed me that he has fractured one of his arms, 2 ribs, been hit in the face and left with a significant bruise after a beating. A beating he received after being recognized as the star of the county's billboards and for maintaining that arrogant attitude that has always characterized him. In prison, you can't just act like the world is at your feet when you no longer have your father or your friend's parents to protect you. My father has not suffered similar incidents, perhaps because he has been more intelligent in his behavior. But it is still early days, his sentence has barely begun, and there is still a chance that someone will put that man in his place.